You're now listening to Security Law. We're entering the final part on the two-part series on the OCBC phishing episode. Enjoy listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Security Law Podcast, Season 2.
A quick recap for those who just joined us. Security Law is covering the recent incident that plagued OCBC. OCBC customers received a phishing message, primarily via SMS. This message explains that the customers are required to click on the link provided on the SMS, fill in their username, password, and the one-time PIN to continue using the service. Customers who do so encounter illegitimate transactions, starting with a new payee being added into their account and subsequently monies transferred out of their account. One such victim reported losing up to 500,000 Sing dollars. If you'd like to get updated on the issue, I highly recommend for you to listen to the part 1 of this podcast. Now, onwards to part 2 of this series. One of the measures that the bank took, and you probably start using cuss words, Kat, is that the person mentioned that the person couldn't pay rent on the first because originally the person had lowered their transfer limit. Okay, so everyone was afraid, hey, this thing happened, better lower your transfer limit so that no one messes up. And guess what happened? When this person, I will call that person A, person A wanted to add a new payee, the new payee is only activated after 24 hours. So imagine you're trying to pay your rent and you put in new payee and it's only active after 24 hours. Okay. From a risk management perspective, yeah, you can say, okay lah, it's acceptable. But if you look at it from a usability perspective, I'm like, hey, I can't do my transactions, man. I'm stuck for 24 hours because it takes 24 hours before the change actually comes on board. I mean, which is a plus and minus stuff. Yep. And person A goes on and says that they've changed the flow of how authentication works. So for example, if you have SingPass, you open the app, you log in with your SingPass, right? You click login using SingPass. It takes you to the SingPass app. And then you tap on the SingPass QR login. And then you enter the SingPass 6-digit PIN. You tick the I agree that I have read carefully and understood the long list of whatever warnings. Click login. And then only you log in to the OCBC account. Now, that's fine. If you don't use the app, you use a browser, gone. You toggle through multiple screens a few times at a point where you still need to agree that I approve that I'm the one logging on to this browser now, which is like, for me, it's a facepalm moment,
Okay.
And the sad part is, our listener was saying that, they feel sorry for those who are not technically savvy because it gets even more worse. When your usability goes down, people will start shrinking away from actually going towards technology. So there has to be a fine balance between, what we do in security and what we do usability. And honestly, I think I've heard enough of issues of, if it's security, then you have to sacrifice usability. And I just feel that organizations are not doing enough to make it frictionless. I'll give you an example. Facebook, everyone knows Facebook, Meta. They have an internal product called 2FAC, which is their own two-factor authentication. They reported very good success using this product because they were constantly improving on how two-factor authentication is much faster than traditional authentication. So what they did was they made sure that usability came first. An average user could use two-factor authentication much more easier, less frictions, much faster. The experience was so good that people wanted to use two-factor authentication as compared to traditional authentication. So in this instance, they won that battle. But if you look at institutions, large organizations, I can share what usually happens in the organization. Oh, we have a new online banking site, that's going to replace this 20-year-old banking site. So we have to, look at security. Okay, so talk to the security guys or the product manager. Hey, security, what do you guys need? Then he looks at the long list of requirements given by the regulators. You need to have password complexity, password meter, make sure password is long, don't approve short passwords, and two-factor. Okay, so then the actual product manager looks at security guy and said, okay, so you go out and you go and buy a product, we'll just integrate. So guess what happens? You have this portal of a new banking site, and you have this third-party product, and you have a very tight deadline for you to launch this product, because the C-levels want to make sure they go out and shout and say, we've launched this new product. The board needs to know that they're meeting their timelines and targets so that they're seen effective, so that they can earn their bonus for Chinese New Year. And, so what happens is you get this product that's just, if you ask me, a jigsaw puzzle of all these parts that's assembled, and here you go. So no one looks at, does it work? But of course, the Facebook approach was quite different, because they had their own internal team, they had their own build team, they had their own product team that looks at all these things, and they look at product, which is Facebook, as their own baby, rather than a mix and mash of all these products. Two-factor authentication system going to say, okay, I give you this portlet, which is a tiny little web box kind of thing. You just paste the set of codes in there and you're good to go. And on your back end, you add this 5 codes that's going to check, and that's it. You're done. Your two-factor is done. Finish. So you don't see that journey, end-to-end journey, that's being taken when you're building that product. So as a result, users like, wow, I got to do this. I got to do this. So it's like it's also a negative experience for the users, and by default, users will start thinking, security means negative impression, mafan. Mafan means very troublesome. Sorry, guys, I'm in a Chinese New Year mood, so all my Chinese words coming out. And the experience becomes so much of friction that the users kind of get tired and frustrated just going by doing what they need to do. So if we make security frictionless, it's going to be a much better experience for the users.
I'd like to offer a slightly different perspective to this one. Although, of course, I may not be in the technical bits of security as much as you, Doc. But if you look at this whole thing, I take an end user point of view to this. If we move away from technical things, we look at the scenario of a kidnap. A kid is kidnapped and then reports to the police, and the whole search starts. And maybe ultimately will end up in paying ransom. So in the case of this, do you blame the law enforcer, or is it the fault of the person who is the victim, or is it the kidnappers? In this situation, I draw parallel with the OCBC case because there isn't an actual object where we want to point to. We move it on to the digital scenario. Crisis is an opportunity for growth as well as transformation. Of course, with that, we have crime. And in this case, if you say that earlier on, if I remember correctly, we were talking, users could have been more careful, or the banks, could have taken a more direct approach or a faster approach to addressing this issue. The thing is, for users, general users like us, if I look at some of the screenshots of the messages that were being sent that were available on different reportings, how can a normal end user be able to differentiate what went wrong there? Was there enough education opportunities to reach to the people, to the mass? What I can see is we are only reaching a selective mass of people who are able to understand and prevent. But you can't say the same for a lot of them. That's the first one. The second one, in regards to the point on first call resolution. So somebody who is working there at the other end receiving the call, but they're really very clear directive as to given on when, under what circumstance is a call considered as urgent that you do not need to raise a ticket. This is something very pressing, because when you have a lot of regulations, and bank is a heavily regulated industry, one thing that I'd like to say is when somebody who works at the other end receive, and if there is not enough clear directives given, would that person have enough knowledge and expertise to make the decision on this is the case where I need not raise a ticket, but I can address that first? There isn't much that we know. We know the how it happens and things like that. It is always a reactive approach. When it happens, yes, we need a lot of people to sit and see through all the data that we have to find out what went wrong. But the first foremost question is, can we prevent it from the first place? Do we have enough to say? It doesn't just fall into the security guys. It doesn't just fall into the end user. It doesn't just fall into the service provider. Everyone takes a mutual consensus role in this to ensure that things don't happen. But are we doing enough? In our earlier session, we talked about, or specifically, I said that there is a difference between dealing with the real problem itself and the difference between publicity or public relations. While public relations are very important, but is the fundamental issues all addressed? If we look at this, a very simple question: why is SMS phishing still so prevalent? That will tell us the direction to all the other issues that we're dealing with. Something so simple like that, it is very similar. We don't have to wait until a bank gets hit. Anybody can can become a victim of SMS phishing. So what can be done to address all these things? That's my observation regarding this case. I wonder if you would have any other thoughts than this.
Enjoying the show so far? Subscribe now so that you don't miss out on the latest episode. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many other platforms. Visit podcast.securityla.asia to get the links to subscribe.
I think you're absolutely right, Prof. In earlier part, we were talking about how message inconsistency is one of the issue that a lot of organizations are facing. In one end, you have marketing and sales saying that I want to send this message out. And in another hand, you have the fraud management team telling you, we've already informed all of our customers, don't click any links. So you have this fundamental issue. Even within the organization, there's a battle going on to say that, hey, we want more revenue versus, hey, we are trying to protect the customers. So these inconsistencies are part and parcel of how the organizations are actually, I wouldn't say amplify, but provide an opportunity for such problems to exist. So the first thing the organizations need to look at is, what is your priority? If your priority is selling, then you may have to accept the risk that you will have a lot more of these kind of phishing issues. And if you're willing to say, take the risk and, I can write it off, my regulators don't care, fine. But what if they say that, no, customers are important? Do we then make a change into how we approach our customers? How do we do marketing? How do we send the message to our customers to say, hey, there's such a product and service that we want you to know that can benefit you on the long run? So these are some of the things that organizations have to have that painful discussion and agree on an approach. Because otherwise, then it's always going to be that tussle that today, this is the issue of the day, the flavor of the day. So everybody looks at security. I can bet you within 2-3 months, this will be something that's done with. There's already 4 projects committed to the board to say that outcome of this incident is that we're going to do these 4 things. And that's it. When things go back to normal, when the dust settles, how will the organization operate? That would determine whether such issues will come back again. And of course, the challenge of having users who are both informed and uninformed is something that the businesses now really have to reach out to. Like I explained to Kat earlier, I go to the ATM machine, I pretty much know the sequence of when the awareness message is going to come out. It's that simple and it's that predictable. So because I know the message is going to come there, my finger automatically goes to next, just because I want to take out the money and I got another 10 people waiting behind me, staring at me for why I'm taking such a long time. So these things do happen. And, sometimes maybe even the channel is not the right place for you to do that awareness. How do you do that awareness? If you look at today, say your mainstream media, you barely see any awareness about cybersecurity. I think most of us watch Netflix, we watch our pay TVs, our satellite TVs, and whatever services we have. You barely see any messages on cybersecurity awareness. You would always see more messages on, hey, the pandemic is hitting you, you have this much of things, please be aware. Imagine if you had turned that kind of rigor into promoting cybersecurity and cyber wellness. I think this issue would still happen, but the impact would have been much lesser. The number of people who have been affected, in my opinion, would have been much, much lesser. Of course, there are a few telltales into how this incident, someone would have avoided the incident. The first one was the use of URL shortener. They were using bit.ly. And based on that, of course, I don't consider myself the layperson. I am in cybersecurity, so I would know these kind of things. So that kind of tells me that, hey, the link, something is already wrong. That's the first indicator that's going to tell me something is wrong. But again, as I mentioned to Kat earlier, you can still spoof the from which number, which makes it look as if this is actually a message that comes from whichever bank that you have, which goes back into that approach. Do you want to send links to your customers, or do you not want to send links to your customers? If you continue sending links to your customers, this is going to be a risk. And this is something that, as an organization, you'll have to look at addressing it. So it goes back into a holistic approach of how you look at security, and not just bits and pieces. Oh, I got two-factor authentication, I got OTP. I don't have to worry. I've pushed all the responsibility to the customers. I don't think that works anymore. And in this case, the regulators have also played a part to say that, if there's too many of this, then service provider, whether it be a bank or a financial service provider, has to take some level of accountability.
I agree with you. But what I'm saying is that there is a difference between informing and actual learning. Just saying that I have informed my customers, that's not enough. And to a certain extent, I'd like to say that's a bit irresponsible. Just because I have disseminated the information, then the onus is on you. You can never blame a victim who's being kidnapped.
True.
Just because you have told them. More needs to be done. And in terms of prioritization, if you prioritize sales and users, are they not interrelated? Do they not deserve equal attention? Because at the end of the day, any business is an ecosystem. And we know that as the uptake of digital technology has increased, especially accelerated during the pandemic session, the risk landscape would have changed so fast. So we are saying that organizations are not able to take a foresight, a predictive, if I may, way of looking at things, but rather to adopt a reactive capability to address issues as it comes. And time again, what lessons have we drawn from the past? Risk is not new. Bank frauds are not new. Everything here that I see, what is new? Nothing. But yet things keeps happening like that. So what I am reading out there, I think, yes, that's good, well and good that you are doing the right things after it has happened. And as Kat pointed out earlier, not everyone is compensated. But even if you're able to compensate everyone, can we pretend, or does that make the victims feel that it has never happened? And then the confidence can be restored 100%? I don't think so. So incidents of frauds are everywhere. They can be perpetrated by insiders as well as your connected stakeholders. So what I am reading now, to me at least, is no longer sufficient. Collecting and dealing with sensitive personal information, this is not new. And in fact, given the advent of big data and stuff like the digital transformation, we have got a lot more of it. So are we saying that organizations are not able yet to catch up with the changes?
I guess organizations can catch up with the things. The question is, how are they going to address it? So let me point a question to you, right? Prof, just say if we were to do an awareness session targeting your parents, right? So let's use your parents in this case as the target group. How would you think be the best approach for us to reach? I mean, not just your parents. For example, my mother who's already 70 years old. How can we reach these people effectively for them to have the comfort to say, yes, I can use online transactions and yet be secure? Just for the sake of argument.
If I work in a bank, I would probably have a more informed answer. But I remember in one of our earlier sections, we did talk about something like that when we discussed the Macau scam episode. And in that discussion, what seemed to work is actually spreading information among community. So that community is important. And for me, I would say, if you find out what is the right way to spread information effectively, then you have to start targeting from there. That is one way. Like even my parents, they receive a lot of notices on scams and so forth. But because I have been talking to my parents and also they hear among their friends a lot of the issues that happen and they read on what is reported, therefore they tend to clarify from me. And to this point, you see that there is a kind of phobia among the elderly, at least in the community that my parents are in that whenever they receive any call unknown, or they receive any message that they're not able to understand, then they don't touch anything and they do. But you see, there is a cost to this. They may end up losing important calls or important information. So how do we look into that one? But for me, if you ask me, talking about my parents, then I can see that to them, the most effective way is community, the community that they are in. And the question then is, are providers doing enough to reach to that community? When they say that I have already informed my customers, these are not your direct customers, but they could be very good customers for you to look into and to reach out to.
Yeah.
So we have to move on from there. It's not enough to just say I have informed my customers. We have to recognize that banks are going beyond that, and the scope of their services is actually beyond all of that.
I think phobia is the better approach, instead of like some individuals from a different older generation who would not think twice about actually accepting calls or clicking on links like that. Better the phobia, maybe, but that's just me. Better the phobia than them not being afraid at all, I think. And Prof, yeah, I remember that particular episode. We had Keith Pereira actually talking about how to spread awareness among the senior citizens. And we shared, I remember also sharing about, of course, I'm a huge fan of Singapore drama. I'll be beside my mom watching Singapore dramas with her, and I've seen how the community works. They would have like ambassadors who are senior citizens themselves, and there will be a huge group of them, for example, maybe gathering around the water cooler or at a restaurant or at the regular neighborhood kopitiam, and these ambassadors will actually go to show, what does a bad message look like, and when this bad message appears, what they can do about it. And yeah, so it's more than just disseminating information, but actually it's also demonstrating it, especially to the senior citizens. Yeah. My 2 cents.
There you go, folks. A solution to the problem that we have. Using unofficial channels to get through. But what's important is, in my opinion, is that these ambassadors should have the right level of information and they shouldn't be peddling fear. So while fear can be a good motivator for users to do things, we should also empower them to say that if you make the right decisions, then you don't have to be worried about, all these scams. Because I guess the challenge is identifying what may look genuine, but it's actually a scam, versus what may look like a scam, but it's actually genuine. And today, those lines are blurring. It's very difficult in today's world at times to really catch a scam, because The bad guys have also improved their English. So they're no longer using lousy English. The English have actually gone up a notch or two. So just using language to catch what they're doing is no longer viable. You have to, just like how they're stepping up their game, we as the good guys, we have to step up our game and reach out to more people. But I guess this is one of the things where, traditional threats are still relevant. It is still part and parcel of everyday life. We could have done more things. Organizations could do more things. The question is how they're going to do it. And Prof and Kat has elaborated beautifully on one of the things that can be done. And the beauty is that Singapore is not such a big country. It's a small island. People usually cluster around in communities, like what you rightfully said. And it's much easier to target these communities and get through to them versus, say, a country like Indonesia or India or even China, where you have vast geographical challenges for you to reach out to people, different area, different regions, sometimes different dialects, for example, in China, and getting that message to them. So in this instance, if you're looking at trying to solve this issue in Singapore, I guess the bank could do a lot more in addressing this problem. So Kat, is this...
just one more. Did you finish?
Yeah, I'm done. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I just thought of one thing that is, I think I read quite some time ago, some academic publications, that a lot of digital campaigns, they are now termed entrapments. Why is it entrapments? Because it's actually a piece to argue against the usefulness of generic awareness training. Because what happens is that if you put employees through this kind of awareness training, it is actually demotivating and it raises a lot of anxiety. And to the extent that it actually demotivates them and affects their own confidence in performing their tasks. So, well, that is from an academic journal. I don't know whether the industry would have a different observation on this. So the same thing, because it came out from when we were talking about fear and stuff like that. So maybe this is one area that we would have to be careful with if we were to embark on the so-called carrot and stick approach.
You're absolutely right. And I feel that this issue is going to still be there. The question that I'm wondering, and probably people in Singapore as well, is that what is going to be the changes that's going to be made by the regulators on governing this. The shared risk approach is interesting because there isn't any at this point of time in any regulators. For example, in Malaysia, if you lose money, you lose money, and if you're lucky enough, then the money gets recovered and it gets returned to you. But in most cases, usually it takes slightly longer time before the victims actually lodge a report. And time is always of the essence when you encounter these kind of issues. The faster you make a report and you reach out to your financial service providers, the faster or the higher the chance that the monies can be recovered. Because these things happen at blazing speed. Some just goes automated end to end to don't know umpteen banks before the money gets cleared out. And usually it goes to some geographic locations or in one instance, some monies ended up in a casino in Philippines where it got cashed out. These are some of the channels where money gets moved out through money laundering. And, by that time, it's usually lost. So what can users do? In some financial service providers, they offer an insurance policy. So in the event that your money gets into such a situation, then you may get reimbursed, provided that it meets the framework of what the insurance provider gives you. I'm not sure in this instance, since the one-time PIN has also been divulged, whether insurance may pay out. Maybe not, because it signals that the user has given away the keys to the kingdom. So that's going to be a challenge. Whether the banks are going to do it or the regulators are going to push for this approach where shared risk is going to come in, I guess we'll have to wait for MAS to announce, and I'm very sure that they're going to announce it very soon on this matter. So any final takes, Kat, Prof?
All good here, Doc.
Same. I think you have summed it up well. Kat, I asked, do you think we have addressed the phishing scams issues?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
All right then.
Thanks for joining us this week on Security Lab. Make sure to visit our website at securitylab.asia, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show.